If we want to get to the bottom of violence, political violence, division, and hatred that leads to violence, that might lead to retribution if this is not handled properly, don't we have an obligation to talk to all of us, not just to talk to one part of the country?
I think that's what you saw tonight.
All right, guys. There was this really intense panel on Abby Phillips' show talking about the whole situation with Charlie Kirk. On one side, you had Anna from the Young Turks, and on the other, a conservative commentator, Tony Gonzalez, who's known for his strong MAGA views.
Tonight, Donald Trump puts the blame to the political left for Charlie Kirk's assassination, even as the manhunt for his killer continues.
Are you concerned for your own safety?
Not really. I'm really concerned for our country. We have a great country. We have a radical left group of lunatics out there, just absolute lunatics, and we're going to get that problem solved. I'm only concerned for the country, yeah.
As we were just discussing, that is a narrative that really kind of leans into the divide that now we know from the governor of Utah, foreign entities are really interested in exploiting. But for President Trump, it's not surprising. But in this moment, it feels like pouring gasoline on the fire in a way.
It is. I think Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, has tried to set the right tone where we need to look to the better angels of our nature. We need to remember that we are not enemies, but friends. We're in a dangerous place as a country. Political violence is rising. And President Trump has a responsibility to the office to try to unite rather than divide. And when he puts the focus solely on the left, after pardoning the January 6 folks, for example, you get an asymmetry that's more likely to encourage violence than to tamp it down. We need to stop this. Political violence is always unacceptable, and we're in a dangerous place as a country. We need to wake up.
Congressman, there were so many tensions on the Hill this week over this, and it really just showed there's a lack of trust, there's a lot of anger, and there's understandable anger and sadness, especially from your conservative colleagues. I don't know if you've been on the Hill earlier today, is that improving any, or is it still as tense as it seems?
Well, one, you got to understand that Congress is a microcosm of the United States, right? So there's a lot of tension within the United States. I would argue that the president is right here, and he's right for blaming the left, because just look at the facts. The facts are the school shooter in Minnesota was a left-wing lunatic. The facts are the school shooter in Tennessee was a left-wing lunatic. So these shooters are more and more becoming these radical leftists. So when the president says that, he's not wrong. I can guarantee you this. President Trump is going to hunt down and find the killer of Charlie Kirk. And if he's not dead already, he's going to bring him to justice. And we should all be rooting for him, because this has rocked the foundation of our republic. When you don't have First Amendment rights, regardless of if somebody's left-leaning or right-leaning, it absolutely destroys the fabric of our nation.
I just want to note, though, you cannot omit, just a couple months ago, Democratic Minnesota state representatives were assassinated.
By a left-wing lunatic.
No, not by a left-wing lunatic. And so I do think that the point everybody is trying to make is that if we want to get to the bottom of violence, political violence, division, and hatred that leads to violence, that might lead to retribution if this is not handled properly, don't we have an obligation to talk to all of us, not just to talk to one part of the country?
I think that's what you saw tonight, right? The reason why we had this press conference was to put everybody's eyes to find this killer, right? And needed everybody, regardless of who was tuning in or not. The sooner we find this murderer, the better this country is. And if we don't find it, it'll be at a detriment to everybody.
Watching this, it's clear Abby Phillips is making a really fair point. She's asking why leadership can't just step up, acknowledge what happened, and call for unity, especially after something so tragic. But what we get instead is more division. It's like some voices just can't help but point fingers instead of pulling people together. They keep falling back on the same old talking points, blaming one side entirely instead of saying, you know what? Violence is never the answer, no matter where it comes from. It's frustrating to watch because it feels like we're stuck in this cycle where finding common ground is almost impossible. A real leader would bring people together, not keep them at odds. But what we see here is the exact opposite. What do you all think? Does this feel like productive conversation to you, or just more noise?
This country is hungry for leaders. And you are an elected member of Congress, and no one's been apprehended yet. I understand what you're saying about political violence, and there has been political violence perpetrated by individuals who identify as on the left. But there's also been political violence perpetrated by those who are clearly on the right, as the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband makes abundantly clear. Please, I am begging you, lead the country from your position of power and try to bring the temperature down. I knew Charlie Kirk personally.
Right.
Charlie Kirk and I disagreed on almost every political issue. Mm-hmm. But what I appreciated about Charlie Kirk is he provided a platform for people like me to speak to a completely different audience and make my case. And I appreciated that about him, and I would like it if members of Congress, both on the left and right, found a way to harbor those types of conversations, both on the House floor, the Senate floor, and also on shows like this.
Well, first off, if anybody is murdering, if anybody is using political rhetoric and using political violence to silence their people that they don't agree with, we should all be against that. We should all push towards curbing that. Not just elected officials, but everyday individuals should also push for that. And part of that is we got to hold one another responsible and accountable. We can't just say, oh, it was somebody else's fault. All of us play a role in this. And look, I think the president is bringing us together. The fact that, we forget it's 9/11. We forget it's the Memorial Day of 9/11. And where was the president? He was at Yankee Stadium today, shaking hands, bringing life to it. I'm not a Yankees fan, but you see that picture with him and all the Yankees baseball players.
He was also referring to the political left as radical lunatics.
He was at the U.S. Open. He was at UFC.
From both sides
the
of his
president
mouth.
has been very active,
and since his election in 2016, the political rhetoric in this country has devolved further.
Can I ask you to respond to that part of what she's addressing, which is what the president said? When I saw someone say this this week, when you hear people, usually online, say they did this, they did that, when we're talking about one man who is a lunatic shooter, criminal, that is so discordant to a lot of this country they're just normal people who are appalled by this. But when you generalize an awful event like this to a whole half of the country, as President Trump seemed to have done today, you're saying that that's bringing the country together, but a lot of people don't hear that.
What I'm saying is, sadly, there isn't just one incident. This isn't just on a decline. This is a more and more regular occurrence of where there is more and more political rhetoric that is turned into political violence, and somebody is not here. And that somebody today or this week is Charlie Kirk. Who is it going to be next? And the way we curve that out is not by just saying this isn't happening. It's by us going, there is a systemic issue that is happening in our country. And instead of blaming one another,
we have to come together. It is happening. And the fish runs from the head down.
To that. But I think the problem is you, sir, as a congressman, just singled out leftist attacks. And that, of course, leaves out things like the attack on the CDC. Just a few weeks ago. It leaves out lots of other texts. I think the point is, particularly in your position of responsibility, particularly on a day like 9/11, there's an obligation not to try to get political points, but to look at the broader cycle and to say we all need to step up. And we all, so am I, sir.
I mean, look at the school shooter at Minnesota. What are the facts in that case?
You apparently don't even recognize the facts around the assassination of the state legislatures.
Look at the fact. Let's start with the alligator nearest to the boat, which was the Minnesota school shooting, right? What I'm getting at is these aren't just one issue.
No, it's all
growing.
Connected.
They're
that
expanding.
Is exactly
They're
right.
all
That's
over the country.
why when you, particularly as a member of Congress, focus on one political side, echoing that.
I just said there's no room for any political rhetoric.
That is
I just said there's no room for any political rhetoric that turns into political violence.
100%
left, right. It doesn't matter.
Let me just take one.
Abby Phillip and Anna Kasparian made such strong points here. They kept giving Tony Gonzalez opportunities to just agree that violence from any side is wrong. But he just couldn't do it. It immediately went back to, but the left. It's wild to watch. It feels like some voices are just incapable of a simple, balanced statement, violence is wrong, period. Instead, it's always deflection. It always has to be a team sport. Anna's point about not even knowing the shooter's motive yet was so important. The rush to blame one side, before any facts are out, is exactly the problem. It just makes you wonder if the goal is ever actually solutions, or just winning a political argument. Let me know what you all think in the comments. Who made the most sense to you in this clip?